England, 1847. The morning fog hung thick over the countryside as Eleanor Collins stared out the carriage window, watching the rolling hills of Hampshire pass by. At 26, she had never imagined she would be travelling to meet a new husband, especially not a duke, less than a year after burying her first. "We shall arrive at Ravenshollow Manor within the hour, Mrs. Collins," announced Mr. Blackwood, her late husband's solicitor and the architect of her current predicament. Eleanor clutched her reticule tighter. "And you are certain there is no other way?" "I fear not, madam. With your husband's debts and your family's inability to support you—" He trailed off, the implication clear. Without this arrangement, destitution awaited her. She straightened her back, determined not to show her anxiety. Her dark green travelling dress, her best, though modest, compared to what would be expected of a duchess, was carefully chosen for this first meeting. Her chestnut hair was neatly arranged beneath her bonnet, and she had practiced a serene expression to mask her inner turmoil. "The Duke of Ravenshollow is one of England's most distinguished noblemen," Mr. Blackwood continued. "His offer is exceedingly generous, considering your circumstances." "Yes, how fortunate I am to be bartered to a man I've never met," Eleanor murmured, then regretted the sharpness of her tone. "Forgive me. I am grateful for your assistance." Mr. Blackwood's expression softened. "The Duke has been in mourning these past 3 years. His children need a mother, and he requires an heir. It is a practical arrangement, one that benefits you both." The carriage passed through imposing iron gates, revealing a grand manor house of weathered stone. Eleanor's breath caught at the sight of Ravenshollow Manor. Imposing and Gothic, its windows glinted like dark eyes, watching her approach. This would be her home, her prison or her salvation, she did not yet know. As the carriage pulled to a stop, Eleanor composed herself. A line of servants stood waiting, and at their head, a tall figure dressed in black, the Duke of Ravenshollow. Edmund Whittaker's stern countenance betrayed no emotion as he watched the carriage door open. At 35, his face already bore the hard lines of one who had known profound loss. His dark hair was shot with silver at the temples, and his penetrating grey eyes seemed to look through Eleanor rather than at her. "Mrs. Collins," his voice was deep and cold as he offered his hand to help her descend. "Welcome to Ravenshollow." Eleanor cursed gracefully. "Your Grace, I am honoured by your invitation." "It is no invitation, madam, but a business arrangement. I believe Mr. Blackwood has explained the terms." His bluntness startled her, though she maintained her composure. "He has. Good. Then we understand each other." The Duke turned to his butler. "Hawkins will show you to your chambers. You may rest before dinner." With a curt bow, he turned and strode back into the house, leaving Eleanor standing with the servants. "Mrs. Collins," an elderly butler said with a slight bow, "if you would follow me." As Eleanor followed him through the grand entrance hall, she noted the portraits of severe-looking ancestors lining the walls, the marble floors polished to a mirror shine, and the conspicuous absence of any warmth or comfort. "The children, Hawkins," she ventured. "Might I meet them today?" "Master William and Miss Charlotte usually take their evening meal in the nursery, madam," Hawkins replied. "The Duke prefers they maintain a strict schedule." "I see. And how old are they?" "Master William is 7 and Miss Charlotte has just turned 5. Eleanor's heart clenched, so young to have lost their mother. Do they know of my arrival?" "They have been informed that their father is remarrying, yes." His tone revealed nothing of their reaction. Her chambers were spacious but austere, with heavy draperies and dark furniture. A lady's maid was waiting to help her freshen up after the journey. "Martha will attend you during your stay," Hawkins explained. "Dinner is served at 7 precisely. The Duke does not tolerate tardiness." When the door closed behind him, Eleanor sank onto the edge of the bed, finally allowing her mask to slip. What had she agreed to? A marriage without love to a man who clearly resented her very presence. "Will there be anything else, ma'am?" Martha asked, a young woman with kind eyes that contrasted with the sombre atmosphere of the house. "No, thank you. I should like a moment alone." When Martha departed, Eleanor moved to the window. From here she could see the extensive gardens of Ravenshollow, beautifully maintained but somehow lacking life. In the distance, she spotted 2 small figures walking with a woman she presumed to be their governess, William and Charlotte. The children she was expected to mother, though their father had made it clear she would be nothing more than a convenient presence in their lives. "Courage, Eleanor," she whispered to herself. "You have survived loss before, you will survive this too." The dinner that evening was a stilted affair. The Duke sat at the head of the long table, Eleanor at the opposite end, a distance that seemed to symbolize the chasm between them. "I trust your accommodations are satisfactory," he said, after they had been served the first course. "Quite, Your Grace. Ravenshollow is magnificent. It has been in my family for 10 generations. His pride was evident, though his expression remained impassive. "Tomorrow we shall discuss the details of our arrangement more thoroughly. For now, you should know that I expect you to fulfill the duties of Duchess with propriety and dignity." Eleanor set down her soup spoon. "And what of your children, Your Grace? What are your expectations regarding them?" Something flickered in his eyes. Pain, perhaps, or anger. "My children have a governess and a nanny. Your role will be to provide a maternal presence when appropriate. They are still recovering from their mother's passing. As are you, it seems." The Duke's jaw tightened. "Let me be clear, Mrs. Collins. I have agreed to this marriage for 2 reasons. My children need a mother figure and I require an heir. Beyond that, I neither desire nor expect anything resembling affection between us. My heart is buried with my late wife, and it shall remain so." The bluntness of his declaration, though not unexpected, stung nonetheless. "You speak with remarkable candor, Your Grace. I prefer honesty to false pretenses. If these terms are unacceptable to you, say so now before the banns are read." Eleanor met his gaze unflinchingly. "I entered into this arrangement with full awareness of its nature. I have no romantic illusions about our union." "Excellent. Then we understand each other." He raised his wine glass slightly. "To a mutually beneficial arrangement." Eleanor raised her own glass, though she did not drink. "When shall we marry?" "A fortnight from today, a small private ceremony. There will be no celebration." "As you wish." The remainder of the meal passed in near silence. When the Duke finally excused himself to attend to business matters, Eleanor felt she could breathe again. She declined dessert and asked to be shown back to her chambers. As she prepared for bed, the enormity of her decision weighed upon her. Tomorrow she would meet the children, the true reason she had accepted this loveless arrangement. Perhaps with them, she might find some purpose in this cold, grand house. Sleep eluded her as rain began to patter against the windows. Ravenshollow creaked and sighed around her, a living entity with secrets hidden in its ancient walls. Somewhere in this vast manor were 2 children who had lost their mother and a man who had lost his heart. Eleanor had lost much too, her husband, her security, her independence. But unlike the Duke, she had not yet surrendered hope. "Perhaps," she whispered into the darkness, "there is still room for happiness within these walls." But even as she spoke the words, she wondered if they were merely wishful thinking. The following morning arrived with unexpected brightness, the rain having cleared to reveal a crisp autumn day. Eleanor woke early, determined to make a favorable impression on the children she would soon call her own. She selected a simple blue dress that complemented her eyes and asked Martha to arrange her hair in a softer style than was her usual custom. "You look lovely, ma'am," Martha said, as she secured the final pin. "If I might be so bold, the children will be taking breakfast in the small parlor this morning. The Duke thought it an appropriate time for your introduction." Eleanor's heart quickened. "Thank you, Martha. I hadn't been informed." "His Grace often makes decisions without much notice," Martha replied with a hint of disapproval in her tone. "If you please, ma'am, the children, they've had a difficult time. Miss Charlotte barely remembers her mother. But Master William—" She hesitated. "Please speak freely. Master William has been rather withdrawn since Lady Ravenshollow's passing. He's protective of his sister and wary of change." Eleanor nodded. "I understand. Thank you for telling me." The small parlor was bathed in morning light when Eleanor entered. 2 children sat at a round table, their backs straight and faces solemn. The governess, a severe-looking woman, stood nearby. "Mrs. Collins," the governess acknowledged with a slight curtsy. "I am Miss Pemberton. Allow me to present Master William and Miss Charlotte Whittaker." William was a serious-looking boy, with his father's grey eyes and dark hair. Charlotte, fair-haired and delicate, regarded Eleanor with undisguised curiosity. "Children, this is Mrs. Collins," Miss Pemberton continued. "As you know, she will soon be married to your father." Eleanor smiled warmly. I'm very pleased to meet you both. William's expression remained guarded. Are you to be our new mother? The directness of his question caught Eleanor off guard. I would be honored to care for you, but I would never presume to replace your mother. Our mother is in heaven, Charlotte announced, her small voice matter of fact. Father says we must not forget her. And you must not, Eleanor agreed, taking a seat at the table. She will always be your mother. Perhaps in time you might think of me as a friend. Miss Pemberton cleared her throat. The children must complete their breakfast before their lessons, Mrs. Collins. Of course, may I join them? The governess seemed surprised by the request, but nodded stiffly. Eleanor spread a napkin across her lap and accepted a cup of tea from a footman. What lessons do you have today? Arithmetic and geography, William answered reluctantly. And I am learning my letters, Charlotte added with a touch of pride. How wonderful! I was always fond of geography myself, Eleanor said. Perhaps sometime you might show me what you're learning. William studied her suspiciously. Father says you lived in London. Is that true? Yes, though I was raised in Dorset, not far from the sea. Charlotte's eyes widened. Have you seen mermaids? A small laugh escaped Eleanor. I'm afraid not, though I've often looked for them. Miss Charlotte, Miss Pemberton admonished, we do not speak of such fanciful nonsense. Eleanor noticed how the little girl's face fell. Perhaps not mermaids, she said gently, but I've seen dolphins leaping in the waves and once a whale spouting in the distance. Charlotte gasped with delight, while William's rigid posture relaxed slightly. Was it terribly large? He asked, curiosity momentarily overcoming his reserve. Enormous, like a small island moving through the water. For the remainder of breakfast, Eleanor spoke of the sea and its creatures, careful to balance wonder with factual information that might meet with Miss Pemberton's approval. By the time the meal ended, Charlotte was smiling, and William, though still reserved, had asked several thoughtful questions. Mrs. Collins. The Duke's voice from the doorway startled them all. He stood watching, his expression unreadable. Your Grace, Eleanor acknowledged, rising from her seat. Children, it is time for your lessons, he said. Miss Pemberton, please escort them to the schoolroom. As the children filed out, Charlotte turned to wave shyly at Eleanor. William merely nodded, but it felt like progress nonetheless. When they were alone, the Duke approached. I see you've met my children. Yes, they're delightful. Charlotte is so bright, and William is remarkably thoughtful for his age. Something that might have been pride flickered across his face. They are well bred. They miss their mother, Eleanor said softly. His expression hardened. That is not a subject for discussion, Mrs. Collins. Forgive me, but if I am to care for them, you are to provide a feminine presence and ensure they learn proper social graces. Their emotional welfare is not your concern. Eleanor felt a flash of indignation. With respect, Your Grace, if I am to be their stepmother, their emotional welfare must be my concern. The Duke regarded her with surprise, clearly unaccustomed to being challenged. You speak boldly for someone in your position. I speak as someone who cares for children's well-being. Surely we can agree on that at least. After a long moment, he inclined his head slightly. You may spend time with them when their lessons permit. Miss Pemberton will inform you of appropriate occasions. It was a small victory, but Eleanor would take it. Thank you. Now, if you would accompany me to the library, we have matters to discuss regarding our marriage contract. The formal arrangements were exactly as Mr. Blackwood had described, cold, practical, and devoid of sentiment. Eleanor would have security and position. The Duke would have a proper mistress for his household and the possibility of an heir. The ceremony would be performed by special license in the private chapel at Ravenshollow, with only essential witnesses present. You understand that while you will bear the title of Duchess, many aspects of the household will remain under my direct control, the Duke stated as he signed the documents. I understand my place, Your Grace, Eleanor replied, signing her own name with a steady hand. Good. I have business in London for the next several days. We shall marry upon my return. Eleanor looked up in surprise. You're leaving? The estate does not run itself, Mrs. Collins. Miss Pemberton will continue to oversee the children. Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper, will acquaint you with the household routines. And with that, he was gone, leaving Eleanor to navigate her new surroundings alone. The following days established a pattern. Eleanor would breakfast with the children, then spend the morning learning the extensive workings of Ravenshollow from the efficient Mrs. Winters. In the afternoons, she would take tea in the nursery, gradually earning Charlotte's trust and chipping away at William's reserve. On the third day, she discovered the library contained a magnificent atlas. That evening, she brought it to the nursery for William's inspection. "This shows the whale migration routes," she explained, pointing to markings on the ocean expanse. "They travel thousands of miles each year." William's eyes widened with genuine interest. "Father never showed me this." "Perhaps he was saving it until you were older," Eleanor suggested. "But I think you're quite capable of understanding it now." From the corner where she played with her dolls, Charlotte called, "Tell us about the mermaids again." Miss Pemberton, who had been darning by the fire, pursed her lips but said nothing. "Instead," Eleanor suggested, "shall I tell you about the fishermen I knew in Dorset? They had the most extraordinary tales of the sea, all true ones." As the days passed, small changes occurred. Charlotte began to seek Eleanor out, bringing her drawings and whispering secrets. William remained more cautious, but occasionally Eleanor would catch him watching her with thoughtful consideration rather than suspicion. One afternoon she discovered him in the garden, attempting to construct a small boat from sticks and leaves. "That's quite clever," she remarked, kneeling beside him despite the damage to her skirts. "But if you use bark for the hull, it might float better." William looked skeptical. "Do you know about boats?" "My father taught me to make them when I was about your age," she confessed. "We would race them in the stream near our cottage." "Your father wasn't a duke," Eleanor smiled. "No, he was a country doctor, not grand at all, but very wise and kind." William seemed to consider this. "Father says you're to be the new Duchess." "Yes, though I must confess I know very little about being one." "My mother was a proper Duchess," he said, a note of challenge in his voice. "I'm sure she was wonderful," Eleanor replied gently. "Perhaps you could tell me about her someday, when you wish to." The boy's eyes filled suddenly with tears, which he wiped away with fierce determination. "I don't remember her face anymore," he whispered. "Sometimes I try, but I can't see it clearly." Eleanor's heart ached for him. "May I show you something?" She reached into her pocket and withdrew a small locket. Inside was a miniature portrait of her late husband. "I keep this with me to help me remember. Perhaps your father has a miniature of your mother you could keep." William touched the portrait with a gentle finger. "Father put all her things away. He doesn't like us to speak of her." "Sometimes," Eleanor said carefully, "when people are very sad, they find it difficult to speak of those they've lost. It doesn't mean they've forgotten or stopped loving them." The boy regarded her solemnly. "Would you ask Father if I might have a picture of Mother?" "I will," she promised. "Now, shall we find some bark for your boat?" That evening, Eleanor wrote a letter to the Duke in London, carefully describing the children's activities and progress. At the end, she added a tentative request. "William has expressed a desire for a miniature portrait of his late mother. I believe it would bring him comfort to have her image close. Might I have your permission to provide him with one?" 3 days later, a package arrived from London. Inside was a small portrait of a beautiful woman with William's solemn eyes and Charlotte's fair hair. There was no note, no acknowledgement of Eleanor's request, but the portrait itself was answer enough. When she presented it to William, the boy's face transformed with joy and grief in equal measure. "This is exactly how I remember her," he whispered. That night, for the first time, William allowed Eleanor to tuck him into bed alongside Charlotte. "Will you tell us a story?" Charlotte pleaded. "Not tonight, my dear. It's quite late," Miss Pemberton interjected. "Just a short one," Eleanor suggested. "About the sea, perhaps." Miss Pemberton sighed but retreated to her chair by the fire. Eleanor told them of lighthouses and the brave men who kept them, of ships guided safely home through treacherous waters. As Charlotte's eyes grew heavy, she leaned against Eleanor's arm. Even William seemed peacefully drowsy. "Good night, dear ones," she whispered, tucking the blankets around them. "Sleep well." As she turned to leave, William's voice stopped her. "Mrs. Collins?" "Yes, William?" "Thank you for the portrait of Mother." Eleanor smiled. "You're very welcome." "Father arrives home tomorrow," he added, his expression serious once more. "Yes, I know. Will you still visit us in the nursery once you're married?" "Every day," she promised. "If you wish it." William nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Good night, Mrs. Collins." As Eleanor left the nursery, She realized that in just a week these children had claimed a piece of her heart. Tomorrow she would marry their father, a man who had explicitly stated he had no interest in her, beyond her practical value to his household. Yet, as she prepared for bed, Eleanor found herself hoping that perhaps, in time, the Duke might come to see her as more than just a convenient arrangement. For the children's sake, if nothing else, she wished for some measure of warmth between them. The thought was still with her when she finally drifted to sleep, the children's trusting faces the last image in her mind. The day of the wedding dawned cold and clear, with frost etching delicate patterns on the window panes of Ravenshollow. Eleanor stood in her chambers, allowing Martha to fasten the buttons of her wedding gown, a modest creation of ivory silk with lace at the collar and cuffs. Her hair was arranged simply, adorned only with a small spray of white roses. "You look beautiful, Ma'am," Martha said, stepping back to survey her work. "Thank you." Eleanor's voice was steady, though her hands trembled slightly as she adjusted her lace gloves. A soft knock at the door revealed Mrs. Winters, the housekeeper. Her usually stern expression softened slightly. "The Duke has returned, madam. The ceremony will begin in half an hour. I shall be ready." When the door closed, Eleanor moved to the window, gazing out at the frost-covered gardens. Was she making a terrible mistake? The children had begun to warm to her, yes, but their father remained as cold and distant as the winter landscape before her. "Eleanor Collins," she whispered to her reflection, "you made your choice. For better or worse, this is your path now." The chapel at Ravenshollow was a small stone building nestled within the estate's grounds. As Eleanor approached on the arm of Mr. Blackwood, she saw only a handful of people gathered inside. The Duke's solicitor, Mrs. Winters, Hawkins the butler and the vicar waiting at the altar. And there stood Edmund Whittaker, Duke of Ravenshollow, his tall figure imposing in formal attire. His expression was inscrutable as she walked toward him. The ceremony was brief and perfunctory. They exchanged the necessary vows, their voices echoing in the near-empty chapel. When the Duke placed the ring on her finger, a simple gold band rather than the elaborate family heirloom she might have expected, his touch was impersonal, as if completing a business transaction. "I now pronounce you man and wife," the vicar declared, his words hanging in the air between them. There was no kiss, merely a formal bow from the Duke before he offered his arm to lead her from the chapel. "Your Grace," the vicar called after them, "the registry requires your signatures." They returned to sign the book, Eleanor's new name, Eleanor Whittaker, Duchess of Ravenshollow, appearing foreign to her eyes as she wrote it for the first time. Outside, to her surprise, the children waited with Miss Pemberton. Charlotte immediately ran forward, a small bouquet of hothouse flowers clutched in her hand. "These are for you," she announced, presenting them proudly. "William helped me pick them." Deeply touched, Eleanor knelt to accept the gift. "They're beautiful. Thank you both." William hung back, watching cautiously. "Does this mean we should call you Mother now?" Eleanor glanced up at the Duke, whose jaw had tightened at the question. "You may call me Eleanor," she said gently, "or whatever feels comfortable to you." "Come, children," Miss Pemberton interrupted. "Her Grace will want to rest after the ceremony." "Actually," Eleanor said, rising to her feet, "I would be delighted if the children would join us for luncheon." She looked to the Duke. "If that meets with your approval, of course." After a moment's hesitation, he nodded. "Very well, Miss Pemberton, please prepare the children." As they walked back to the main house, the Duke maintained a careful distance between them. "I trust your accommodations have been satisfactory during my absence," he said formally. "Yes, thank you. Everyone has been most kind." "And the children? Mrs. Winters informs me you've spent considerable time with them." Eleanor detected a note of something in his voice. Disapproval, curiosity. "They're wonderful children, Your Grace. Charlotte is so imaginative, and William has such a keen mind. William has been difficult since his mother's death. Miss Pemberton reports he has been more engaged this past week. He misses her greatly," Eleanor said carefully. "Thank you for sending the portrait. It meant the world to him." The Duke's step faltered slightly. It was a reasonable request. Luncheon was a stilted affair, though the children's presence provided some relief from the tension. Charlotte chattered happily about the flowers she had chosen, while William observed the adults with his characteristic thoughtfulness. "Will there be cake?" Charlotte asked suddenly. "Mother always said weddings should have cake." A painful silence fell over the table. The Duke's knuckles whitened around his fork. "Charlotte," Miss Pemberton admonished, "that is quite enough." Eleanor intervened gently. "There is no cake today, but perhaps we might ask cook to prepare something special for dessert." The Duke set down his utensils with a decisive click. "Children, you are excused. Miss Pemberton, please take them back to the nursery." When they had gone, he turned to Eleanor, his expression cold. "I would appreciate it if you would not make promises to my children without consulting me first." "It was merely a suggestion about dessert," Eleanor replied, trying to keep her voice even. "It begins with dessert and ends with them growing attached, expecting things I cannot provide." "You mean affection?" His eyes flashed. "I mean false hopes. They have already lost one mother. I will not have them believing in fairy tales about happy families." Eleanor set down her napkin. "With respect, Your Grace, they are children. They deserve whatever happiness we can give them. They deserve stability and structure, not emotional indulgence." "And why must those things be mutually exclusive?" Eleanor challenged. "Why can they not have both security and love?" The Duke stood abruptly. "Because love is transient, Your Grace. It deceives and then it destroys. I will not build my children's future on such a fragile foundation." With that, he strode from the room, leaving Eleanor alone at the vast dining table on her wedding day. The weeks that followed established a rhythm to their unusual marriage. Eleanor gradually took over management of the household, proving herself both capable and efficient. The Duke retreated to his study for most of the day, emerging only for dinner, where conversation remained painfully formal. At night they retired to separate chambers. The Duke had made it clear that while he expected an heir eventually, he was not yet prepared to fulfill that aspect of their arrangement. Eleanor found her joy in the hours spent with the children. Under her gentle guidance, Charlotte blossomed, her natural exuberance finding appropriate outlets. William remained more reserved, but increasingly sought Eleanor's company, particularly in the library where they would pore over maps and natural history volumes together. One evening, as winter tightened its grip on Ravenshollow, Eleanor was reading to the children in the nursery when the door opened unexpectedly to reveal the Duke. "Father!" Charlotte exclaimed, jumping up to greet him. "Good evening, Charlotte." He patted her head awkwardly. "William!" The boy nodded solemnly. "Father, I apologize for the interruption," the Duke said, his gaze moving to Eleanor. "I was not aware you were here." "We were just reading about explorers," William volunteered. "Eleanor knows about Captain Cook's voyages." The Duke's eyebrow raised at the familiar use of her name, but he made no comment. "Indeed. My father was interested in exploration," Eleanor explained. "He had several books on the subject." "May Father join us?" Charlotte asked, tugging at the Duke's coat. Eleanor saw him stiffen, clearly uncomfortable. "I'm sure your father has important matters to attend to." "Actually," the Duke said, surprising them all, "I believe I can spare a few minutes." He lowered himself stiffly into a chair, his tall frame incongruous among the nursery furniture. Charlotte immediately climbed onto his lap, while William sat nearby watching carefully. "Please continue," the Duke said to Eleanor. She resumed reading, acutely aware of his gaze upon her. When she described Cook's navigation techniques, the Duke unexpectedly interjected to explain celestial navigation in terms the children could understand. "Father knows about the stars," William told Eleanor. "He taught me the constellations last summer." "Did he?" Eleanor smiled, glimpsing for the first time the father beneath the Duke's forbidding exterior. "Perhaps when spring comes, we might all observe them together." The Duke made no commitment, but neither did he dismiss the suggestion. When the children were finally tucked into bed, Eleanor and the Duke walked together down the corridor. "You're good with them," he said abruptly. The unexpected compliment caught her off guard. "Thank you. They make it easy. They're wonderful children." "They were not always so. After their mother died." He stopped, seeming to regret having raised the subject. Eleanor ventured carefully. "Children are remarkably resilient, but they need guidance through their grief." The Duke's face hardened. "And you believe I failed to provide that?" "Not at all. I merely meant I have done everything in my power to protect them from further pain," he interrupted, "including this marriage of convenience." Eleanor met his gaze steadily. "And yet you deny them the comfort of speaking about their mother, of remembering her openly." "You overstep, Your Grace." "Perhaps," she acknowledged, "but I speak only out of concern for William and Charlotte." They had reached the door to her chambers. The Duke stood rigidly, internal conflict evident in the tightness of his jaw. "My wife, my first wife, was everything to them," he said finally. "To me. When she died, something in this house died with her. I cannot resurrect it, nor would I try. I would never presume to replace her," Eleanor said gently, "but perhaps in time we might build something new, for the children's sake." He looked at her then, really looked at her, as if seeing her clearly for the first time. "You are not what I expected, Eleanor Collins." "Whitaker," she corrected softly. "Eleanor Whitaker now." A flicker of something, recognition perhaps, crossed his face. "Yes. Good night, Lady Ravenshollow." "Good night, Your Grace." As winter deepened, subtle changes appeared at Ravenshollow. The Duke began to join them occasionally for tea in the afternoon. He would listen as Eleanor read to the children, sometimes adding his own knowledge to the stories. Once, to everyone's astonishment, he brought a wooden toy ship he had carved for William. "It's not very good," he said gruffly, "but after hearing about your interest in exploration—" William's face had lit up with joy. "Did you make this, Father? Truly?" "I did, though it's been many years since I attempted such craftsmanship." "It's magnificent," the boy declared, examining every detail. Eleanor had caught the Duke's eye over William's head, sharing a moment of quiet understanding that felt like the first true connection between them. Yet for every step forward, there seemed to be a retreat. The Duke remained fiercely private, rebuffing any attempt to discuss his late wife or his own feelings. His moments of warmth were invariably followed by periods of withdrawal. Christmas approached, bringing with it the question of traditions and celebrations. Eleanor found herself facing resistance from the Duke when she suggested decorating the Great Hall. "Ravenshollow has not celebrated Christmas since my wife's passing," he informed her coldly. "The children receive gifts, of course, but there are no festivities." "But surely some observance would bring them joy," Eleanor pressed. "Not extravagant, just some greenery, perhaps, a Yule log. My decision is final." Eleanor might have accepted his verdict had she not later overheard Charlotte asking William if Father Christmas would find them this year. "Don't be silly," William replied, with the world-weary wisdom of his 8 years. "Father doesn't permit Christmas at Ravenshollow, not since Mother died." The sadness in his voice spurred Eleanor to action. That evening she knocked on the door of the Duke's study, a liberty she had rarely taken before. "Enter," came his voice. She found him at his desk, surrounded by estate ledgers. "Forgive the interruption, Your Grace." "What is it?" He did not look up from his work. "I wish to discuss Christmas arrangements." His pen paused. "I believe I made my position clear." "You did," Eleanor acknowledged, closing the door behind her. "But I must speak on behalf of the children." Now he did look up, a warning in his eyes. "My children." "Our children," she corrected gently, "at least in the eyes of society and the law. And they deserve a Christmas." "They have never complained." "Because they dare not," Eleanor interrupted. "They have learned to suppress their desires rather than risk your disapproval." The Duke rose to his feet, anger evident in the set of his shoulders. "You presume too much about matters you do not understand." "Then help me understand," she challenged. "Why deny them something as simple as Christmas decorations? What possible harm could it do?" "It was my wife's favorite holiday," he said, his voice suddenly raw with emotion. "She transformed Ravenshollow each December. Every garland, every candle was placed by her hand. The children would help her decorate the tree, and she would—" He stopped, turning away. "I cannot bear to see pale imitations of her traditions." Eleanor's anger softened as understanding dawned. "You're not protecting the children from pain," she said quietly. "You're protecting yourself." His shoulders stiffened. "You know nothing of my pain." "I know what it is to lose someone you love," she replied. "My husband was not a grand man like yourself, but he was kind and good. And when he died, I thought the world had ended." She moved closer, though she did not touch him. "But the world continues, Your Grace. And so must we." The Duke turned, his expression a battlefield of emotion. "Do you think I don't know that? Every morning I wake and remember she is gone. Every night I retire alone with that same knowledge. Yet I rise, I manage the estate, I ensure my children's future. I continue. Existing is not living," Eleanor said gently, "and neither is punishing yourself by denying joy, not only to yourself but to William and Charlotte." He studied her face as if searching for something. You truly care for them, don't you? I do, very much. After a long moment he sighed, his rigid posture softening slightly. What would you propose? Something modest. It was a small victory, but a significant one. Thank you, Your Grace. Edmund, he said unexpectedly, when we are alone you might call me Edmund. Eleanor felt a flutter of something warm in her chest. Thank you, Edmund. The Christmas preparations brought a new energy to Raven's Hollow. Under Eleanor's direction, the servants hung simple evergreen garlands in the main hall. A Yule log was selected and prepared with traditional herbs. Eleanor herself crafted small gifts for the children and staff, working late into the night on her creations. To her surprise, the Duke, Edmund, did not retreat from these activities, but began to participate in small ways. He approved the placement of candles in the windows, a tradition from his own childhood. He instructed the groundskeeper to cut the finest spruce for the Great Hall, where a modest tree would be decorated. On Christmas Eve, the four of them gathered to adorn the tree. Charlotte, beside herself with excitement, carefully placed glass ornaments on the lower branches. William, more reserved but clearly pleased, helped his father with the higher decorations. Eleanor watched them together, father and son working side by side, and felt a profound sense of rightness. This one was Mother's favorite, William said suddenly, holding up a delicate glass bird. Eleanor held her breath, waiting for Edmund's reaction. After a moment's hesitation, he knelt beside his son. Yes, he said softly. She loved birds. Do you remember how she would feed them in the garden? William nodded, his eyes shining. She let me help. Perhaps, Edmund suggested, his voice rough with emotion. You might like to continue that tradition this winter. The boy's face lit up. Could we? Truly? I think your mother would like that very much. It was the first time Eleanor had heard him speak of his late wife with anything other than guarded pain. That night, as they sat by the fire after the children had gone to bed, she found the courage to broach the subject. Thank you, she said simply, for allowing William to speak of his mother. Edmund stared into the flames. I thought I was protecting them by not speaking of her. I believed the memories would only cause them pain. Sometimes memories are all we have, Eleanor replied, and sharing them can ease the burden of loss. He looked at her then, his grey eyes reflecting the firelight. You are wiser than your years would suggest, Eleanor. Not wise, just acquainted with grief. A comfortable silence fell between them. When Edmund finally spoke again, his voice was hesitant, almost vulnerable. Her name was Caroline. We were childhood friends before we were sweethearts. When she died in childbirth, our third child, who also did not survive, I thought I would never feel anything but pain again. Eleanor reached out impulsively, placing her hand over his. I'm so sorry. He did not pull away. Caroline would have liked you, he said softly. She would have approved of how you care for the children. That means a great deal to me. Their eyes met, and for a breathless moment Eleanor felt something shift between them, a thawing of the ice that had encased his heart. Christmas Day brought simple celebrations, gifts exchanged by the fire, a special meal shared with the children, carols sung by the servants in the hall. Throughout it all, Edmund remained present, engaged, his eyes frequently finding Eleanor's across the room. That night, he escorted her to her chamber door, as had become their custom. But instead of the formal good night she expected, he hesitated. Thank you, he said finally, for bringing Christmas back to Ravenshollow. It was my pleasure. The children were so happy. Not only the children. His gaze was intense, searching. Eleanor, I have not been kind to you. You deserved better than the cold arrangement I offered. You have been fair, she said softly, and increasingly kind. You have changed this household, he continued. Changed me, perhaps. I find myself looking forward to our conversations, to your company. Eleanor's heart quickened. As do I. He stepped closer, his hand rising as if to touch her face, then faltering. I should bid you good night. Yes, she whispered, though everything within her wished him to stay. Good night, Eleanor. Good night, Edmund. As winter gave way to the first tentative signs of spring, the atmosphere at Ravenshollow continued to warm. Edmund increasingly sought Eleanor's company, not only for matters concerning the children or the estate, but for conversation, for companionship. They began to take walks together in the gardens when weather permitted, discussing books they had read, sharing stories of their childhoods. Eleanor found herself drawn to this new side of him, the thoughtful man beneath the Duke's stern exterior, the loving father emerging from behind walls of grief. Yet physical intimacy remained absent from their marriage. Edmund had not revisited the subject of an heir, and while their emotional connection deepened, he maintained a careful physical distance. One evening in late March, a violent storm descended upon Ravenshollow. Thunder rattled the windows, and lightning illuminated the night sky in brilliant flashes. Eleanor was reading in her chamber when a small knock came at her door. She opened it to find Charlotte, white-faced and trembling. "I'm frightened of the thunder," the little girl confessed. "Oh, my dear." Eleanor knelt to embrace her. "Would you like to stay with me for a while?" Charlotte nodded against her shoulder. "William said I was being a baby, but I can't help it." "Even grown-ups can be frightened of storms," Eleanor assured her. "Come, let's sit by the fire and I'll tell you stories until you feel better." She had just settled Charlotte on the small sofa when another knock came. This time it was William trying to maintain his dignity despite his obvious discomfort. "I've come to check on Charlotte," he announced, though his eyes darted nervously as thunder boomed. "How thoughtful," Eleanor said, hiding her smile. "Perhaps you'd like to join us?" Soon both children were huddled beside her as she told stories of brave sailors weathering storms far greater than this one. When the loudest clap of thunder yet shook the house, Charlotte burrowed against her side while William clutched her hand. The door opened without a knock this time, revealing Edmund in his dressing gown, his face tight with concern. "The children aren't in their beds," he began, then stopped at the sight of them curled beside Eleanor. "They were a bit frightened by the storm," she explained. His expression softened. "I see. Father, will you stay too?" Charlotte pleaded. "Eleanor is telling us about sailors in storms." To Eleanor's surprise, Edmund entered the room, closing the door behind him. "I suppose I could listen for a while." He settled into a chair opposite them, his presence filling the cozy space. As Eleanor continued her story, she noticed how his eyes rarely left her face, how they warmed when she made the children laugh, despite their fears. When the storm finally began to abate and Charlotte's eyelids grew heavy, Edmund rose. "I believe it's time these sailors returned to their own beds." "But, Father," Charlotte protested sleepily, "couldn't we stay with Eleanor tonight?" Edmund glanced at Eleanor, a question in his eyes. "I don't mind," she said softly. "Please, Father," William added unexpectedly, "just for tonight." After a moment's consideration, Edmund nodded. "Very well, but just this once." Eleanor helped settle the children in her large bed, tucking the blankets around them. As she straightened, she found Edmund watching from the doorway, his expression unreadable. "Thank you," he said quietly when she joined him, "for comforting them." "They're dear to me," she replied simply. His gaze was intense, searching. "You've become essential to them. He hesitated. "To Ravenshollow." Eleanor felt the weight of unspoken words between them. "I'm glad to be of service." "It's more than service, Eleanor. You must know that." Before she could respond, Charlotte called sleepily from the bed. "Eleanor, aren't you coming?" "In a moment, dear," she called back, then turned to Edmund. "I should—" "Yes, of course." He stepped back. "Good night, Eleanor." "Good night, Edmund." As she settled beside the children, Eleanor's mind whirled with possibilities. Had she imagined the longing in his eyes? Was it possible that this marriage of convenience was becoming something more? In the days that followed, Edmund seemed both drawn to her and troubled by that attraction. He sought her company, yet maintained a careful emotional distance. Eleanor, uncertain of his feelings and unwilling to risk the fragile peace they had established, followed his lead. Then came the evening that changed everything. Eleanor had been working with Mrs. Winters on household accounts when a message arrived from the village schoolmaster. A family had fallen ill, and the children needed temporary care. Without hesitation, Eleanor ordered the carriage prepared. "Your Grace," Mrs. Winters protested, "surely the village authorities can manage this matter. 3 children with no one to care for them?" Eleanor shook her head. "I cannot ignore such need when it is within my power to help." By the time Edmund returned from inspecting the tenant farms, Eleanor had installed the 3 Campbell children, aged 3, 5, and 7, in a guest chamber under Martha's watchful eye. The village doctor had assured her their illness was not contagious, merely the result of poor nutrition and cold conditions. "What is the meaning of this?" Edmund demanded when he discovered the situation. "You've brought strangers into our home without consultation. They needed immediate help," Eleanor explained. "Their mother is in the infirmary, and their father was injured in the mill accident last month. There are proper channels for such charity." "They are children, Edmund," she interrupted, "not charity cases. Would you have had me leave them alone and afraid?" His expression darkened. "You overstep your authority." "Then I apologize," she said, though her tone held no regret. "But I would do the same again." To her surprise, William appeared in the doorway behind his father. "Are they very ill?" he asked anxiously. Eleanor softened. "No, dear, just tired and hungry. They'll be fine with proper care." Might I visit them?" the boy asked hesitantly. "I could bring them some of my books, perhaps." Edmund stared at his son in astonishment. William, who rarely showed interest in others, who guarded his possessions zealously, was offering to share with strangers. "That's very kind, William," Eleanor said warmly. "I'm sure they would appreciate it." The boy looked to his father for permission. After a long moment, Edmund nodded. "You may visit them tomorrow if the doctor approves." When William had gone, Edmund turned back to Eleanor. His expression conflicted. "You've changed him. Changed them both." "Children learn by example," she said simply. "They have good hearts." "As do you." His voice had softened. "Your compassion, it reminds me of—" "Caroline?" Eleanor suggested gently. He nodded. "She would have done exactly as you did today." Over the next week, the Campbell children became temporary members of the household. To everyone's surprise, William and Charlotte took them under their wing, sharing toys and stories. Edmund, initially resistant, found himself drawn into their games, his natural reserve melting in the face of childish enthusiasm. Eleanor watched in quiet joy as the man she had married gradually emerged from behind the Duke's formal facade. He laughed more freely, spoke more openly, even joined in an impromptu game of hide-and-seek that left Hawkins scandalized and the children delighted. One evening, as they sat together in the library after the children had gone to bed, Edmund regarded her with thoughtful eyes. "You've given William and Charlotte something I could not," he said quietly. "What do you mean?" "Joy. The courage to open their hearts." He set aside his book. "I thought I was protecting them by teaching them restraint, but you've shown me they need more than that to truly live." Eleanor felt a rush of emotion at his words. "They need you, Edmund. Your love, your wisdom. They treasure every moment you spend with them." "And you?" he asked, his voice dropping to a near whisper. "What do you need, Eleanor?" The question caught her off guard. Before she could answer, the library door burst open, and Charlotte ran in, her nightgown billowing around her. "Eleanor, father, young Thomas Campbell said his first word. He said duck when I showed him my wooden toys." Edmund chuckled, lifting his daughter onto his lap. "That's remarkable indeed. But shouldn't you be in bed, young lady?" "I was too excited to sleep," Charlotte confessed, "and then I heard a strange noise outside my window." "What sort of noise?" Eleanor asked, immediately concerned. "Like scratching. William says it's just the tree branches, but it sounded different." Edmund exchanged a glance with Eleanor. "I'll investigate. Come, I'll take you back to bed and check on this mysterious noise." As they left the library, Eleanor felt a curious mix of disappointment and anticipation. What might Edmund have said if they hadn't been interrupted? What might she have answered? Later that night, unable to sleep, Eleanor wrapped a shawl around her shoulders and made her way to the small balcony adjoining her chambers. The spring air was cool but not unpleasant, scented with the first blooms of the season. "Eleanor!" She turned to find Edmund standing in the shadows of the garden below, looking up at her. "What are you doing out so late?" she asked. "I could ask the same of you," he replied. "May I join you?" At her nod, he disappeared, then, moments later, knocked softly at her chamber door. Eleanor admitted him, suddenly conscious of her informal attire and loose hair. "I apologize for the intrusion," he said, remaining near the doorway. "But there was something I wished to say, and I find I cannot wait until morning." "What is it?" she asked, her heart quickening. Edmund took a step closer, his expression serious in the candlelight. "When we married, I told you I would never love again. I believed it with absolute certainty." Eleanor held her breath, afraid to hope. I was wrong, he continued, his voice low and intense. What I feel for you, it has grown so gradually that I scarcely recognized it until it was too late to resist. Edmund, she whispered, unable to say more. He moved closer still, close enough that she could see the vulnerability in his eyes. I do not expect you to return these feelings. Our arrangement was never meant to be more than practical, but I find I cannot continue to treat you as merely the mistress of my household, the caretaker of my children, not when you have become so much more to me. Eleanor's heart soared at his words. And if I told you that my feelings have changed as well, that what began as duty has become something else entirely? His eyes widened with hope. Eleanor, do you mean— I love you, Edmund, she said simply. I have for some time now. For a moment he stood motionless as if unable to believe her words. Then, with a sound that was half laugh, half sigh, he closed the distance between them and took her hands in his. I love you, he said, his voice rough with emotion. I fought against it, told myself it was impossible, but I can deny it no longer. Slowly, giving her every chance to pull away, he lowered his head until his lips met hers in a tender kiss. Eleanor responded with all the feeling she had kept hidden for months, her arms slipping around his neck as his encircled her waist. When they finally parted, Edmund rested his forehead against hers. Stay with me, he whispered. Be my wife in truth, not just in name. Yes, she answered without hesitation. With all my heart, yes. That night, their marriage was finally consummated, not as the cold arrangement it had begun, but as a union of deep and genuine love. As dawn broke over Ravenshollow, Eleanor lay in Edmund's arms, her head resting on his chest, his heartbeat steady beneath her ear. What changed? She asked softly. When did you begin to see me differently? He was quiet for a moment, his fingers trailing through her hair. There wasn't a single moment, he said finally. It was countless small things, the way you read to the children, how you stood your ground when you believed you were right, your compassion for the Campbell family. He pressed a kiss to her temple. You brought life back to Ravenshollow, Eleanor, to me. She smiled, nestling closer. And you gave me a home, a family. We should tell the children, Edmund said, his tone thoughtful, that things have changed between us. Do you think they'll understand? He chuckled softly. I suspect they've understood far longer than we have. Spring blossomed fully at Ravenshollow, transforming the austere landscape into a riot of colour and life. The change in the estate mirrored the transformation within its walls. Where once silence and formality had reigned, now laughter and warmth prevailed. Edmund and Eleanor no longer maintained the pretense of a marriage in name only. They shared chambers, took meals with the children whenever possible, and were often seen walking the grounds together, their hands entwined, their conversation animated. The children flourished in this new atmosphere. Charlotte's natural exuberance found free expression, while William's serious nature was increasingly balanced by moments of boyish enthusiasm. They adored their stepmother openly now, seeking her guidance and affection without reservation. Most remarkable was the change in Edmund himself. The rigid, formal duke had given way to a man who smiled readily, who joined in the children's games, who looked at his wife with undisguised love. You're different, father, William observed one afternoon as they worked together in the newly established workshop where Edmund was teaching his son the basics of carpentry. Am I? Edmund asked, guiding William's hands on the plane. You laugh more, the boy said seriously, and you don't look sad when you think no one is watching. Edmund paused, moved by his son's perception. I am happier now, he acknowledged. Are you, William? The boy nodded solemnly. I like it when you and Eleanor are happy together. It makes everything feel right. Like a proper family. Yes. William hesitated. Do you think Mother would mind that we're happy now? Edmund set down his tools and knelt before his son. Your mother loved you more than anything in the world, William. Her greatest wish would be for your happiness. He touched the boy's cheek gently. And I believe she would be pleased that Eleanor cares for you as she would have. William's eyes brightened. I think so too. That evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed, Edmund shared the conversation. He worries that being happy somehow dishonors Caroline's memory, he said, his voice tinged with sadness. It's natural, Eleanor replied, brushing out her hair. He loved her deeply, as did you. Edmund moved behind her, taking the brush from her hands to continue the task himself. "I've been thinking," he said as he drew the brush through her chestnut waves, "that perhaps we should speak more openly of Caroline, not just when the children ask, but as a natural part of their lives." Eleanor met his eyes in the mirror. "I think that would bring them comfort. And you? Would it trouble you to hear me speak of her?" She turned to face him, taking his hands in hers. "Edmund, Caroline will always be a part of your life, of the children's lives. Loving me doesn't diminish what you shared with her, just as my feelings for you don't lessen the affection I held for my first husband." He pulled her into his arms, holding her close. "How did I come to deserve such wisdom and grace?" "The same way I came to deserve such love," she replied, smiling up at him. "Pure, unexpected fortune." May arrived, bringing with it plans for Charlotte's 6th birthday. The little girl had requested a picnic by the lake, with games and treats for her small circle of friends from the village. Eleanor threw herself into the preparations, determined to make the day special. She commissioned a new doll from the finest toy maker in London, sewed a matching dress for Charlotte to wear, and arranged for a small orchestra to play during the celebration. The morning of the birthday dawned clear and warm. Charlotte, beside herself with excitement, twirled in her new dress while William watched with the indulgent tolerance of an older brother. "You look very pretty," he conceded when she demanded his opinion. "Like a princess?" she pressed. "Like a very nice Charlotte," he replied diplomatically. Eleanor laughed, adjusting the ribbon in the little girl's hair. "You both look wonderful. Now, shall we see if your father is ready?" They found Edmund in his study, completing some urgent correspondence before the day's festivities. He looked up as they entered, his face lighting with pleasure at the sight of them. "My, what elegant company," he declared, setting aside his pen. "Especially the birthday girl." Charlotte performed an exaggerated curtsy, then rushed to hug him. "Is it time for the picnic yet, Father?" "Nearly," he assured her. "I've just one more letter to sign, and then I'm entirely at your disposal for the day." "Promise?" she asked seriously. "You have my word as a duke," he replied with equal gravity, though his eyes twinkled. The picnic was a tremendous success. The children played games on the lawns, sloping down to the lake, while the adults conversed in the shade of ancient oaks. Eleanor, watching Edmund join in a game of blind man's buff, felt her heart swell with love for this man who had transformed from the cold, forbidding duke into a doting father and husband. Later, as Charlotte opened her gifts surrounded by admiring friends, William appeared at Eleanor's side. "She's very happy," he observed. "Yes, she is," Eleanor agreed. "Are you enjoying the day as well?" He nodded. "Father asked if I might like a similar celebration for my birthday in August." "And what did you say?" "That I'd prefer a smaller gathering, perhaps just the 4 of us, with a fishing expedition on the lake." Eleanor smiled, touched by his inclusion of her in his family circle. "That sounds perfect." As the day wound to a close and the guests departed, Charlotte declared it had been the very best birthday in the history of birthdays. Exhausted but elated, she fell asleep in the carriage on the short journey back to the house. Edmund carried her up to bed, with Eleanor and William following behind. As they tucked her in, still in her party dress since she was too tired for nightclothes, Charlotte stirred briefly. "Thank you for my perfect day," she murmured sleepily. "You're very welcome, sweetheart," Eleanor whispered, kissing her forehead. In the corridor outside, William hesitated before heading to his own room. "It was a good day," he said, his tone conveying deeper meaning than the simple words. "It was," Edmund agreed, placing a hand on his son's shoulder. "One of many to come, I hope." The boy nodded, then surprised them both by hugging Eleanor before retreating to his chamber. As they walked to their own rooms, Edmund drew Eleanor close. "Have I told you today how much I love you?" "You have," she smiled, "but I never tire of hearing it." "Then let me show you instead," he murmured, leading her toward their bedchamber. Later, as they lay entwined in the peaceful darkness, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as a cold arrangement had blossomed into the deepest love she had ever known. "What are you thinking?" Edmund asked, his voice drowsy. "How fortunate I am," she replied. "How different life might have been had Mr. Blackwood not arranged our meeting." "It wasn't fortune," he said, pulling her closer. "It was inevitable. Some part of me knew from the first moment I saw you standing in the entrance hall, trying so valiantly to hide your apprehension, that you would change everything." Eleanor chuckled. "You certainly concealed it well with your talk of business arrangements and practical considerations." "Mere self-defense," he admitted. "I was terrified of feeling anything again, of risking the pain of loss. And now," he kissed her softly, "now I know that what we have is worth any risk." The following weeks passed in a haze of contentment. Edmund included Eleanor in estate matters, valuing her practical mind and compassionate perspective. Together, they implemented improvements for the tenants, established a small school on the estate for the workers' children, and hosted a May Day celebration that brought together all classes in a day of shared pleasure. Through it all, their love deepened, rooted now in genuine partnership as well as affection. The children thrived in the atmosphere of security and warmth, growing more confident and open with each passing day. Then came the morning when Eleanor awoke, feeling strangely unwell. The sensation passed quickly, but returned the next day, and the next. "Perhaps you should consult Dr. Harrison," Edmund suggested, concerned by the pallor of her normally rosy complexion. "It's nothing serious," she assured him, "just a passing indisposition." But when the symptoms persisted for a week, she reluctantly agreed to see the doctor. His examination was thorough, and his conclusion unexpected, though in retrospect, Eleanor realized she should have recognized the signs herself. "Congratulations, Your Grace," Dr. Harrison said with a smile. "You are with child. I estimate the birth will occur in early January." Eleanor sat motionless, overwhelmed by a flood of emotions. A child, their child. The heir Edmund had initially sought in their arrangement, now to be born of genuine love. She found him in the library, poring over estate maps. When he looked up and saw her standing in the doorway, he immediately rose, concern evident in his expression. "Eleanor, what did the doctor say?" She moved to him, taking his hands in hers. "Edmund, I'm with child." For a moment he stood perfectly still, his face registering shock, then wonder, then joy so intense it brought tears to his eyes. "A child," he whispered. "Our child." "Are you pleased?" she asked, though his reaction left little doubt. In answer, he swept her into a gentle embrace. "Pleased? Eleanor, you have given me more happiness than I ever thought possible, and now this gift as well. I am beyond pleased. I am overwhelmed with gratitude and love." The news of Eleanor's pregnancy brought fresh joy to Ravenshollow. Charlotte was ecstatic at the prospect of a baby sibling, immediately volunteering to help in every way possible. William's reaction was more measured, though his quiet excitement was evident in the careful way he began to make space in the nursery for the new arrival. Rearranging his own belongings without being asked, Edmund was transformed by the news, his happiness evident in everything he did. He insisted Eleanor rest frequently, brought her special treats from the kitchen, and spent hours discussing names and plans for the child's future. Only one shadow fell across their happiness. As Eleanor's condition progressed, she sometimes caught a flicker of fear in Edmund's eyes. Though he tried to hide it, she knew the source of his anxiety. Caroline had died in childbirth, along with their infant. One evening, as they sat together in their private sitting room, Eleanor finally addressed his unspoken fear. "Edmund," she said gently, taking his hand, "I am well and strong. Dr. Harrison says everything is progressing perfectly." He attempted a smile. "Of course, I have no doubts. But you do," she countered, "and it's natural that you should. What happened to Caroline was a tragedy beyond bearing, but it does not mean history will repeat itself." He looked away, his jaw tight with emotion. "I cannot lose you, Eleanor. The thought alone is unbearable." "You won't lose me," she assured him. "I promise you." Though he nodded, she knew his fears would not be easily dismissed. In the weeks that followed, she did everything possible to demonstrate her good health and spirits, while Edmund hovered protectively, arranging for the finest midwife in London to attend the birth and consulting multiple physicians about the latest advances in maternal care. As summer gave way to autumn, Eleanor's body changed, her slender frame now gracefully rounded with new life. Edmund watched these changes with mingled adoration and anxiety, his love for her deepening even as his protective instincts intensified. The children responded to the coming arrival in their own ways. Charlotte spoke constantly to the baby, convinced it could hear her through Eleanor's swelling abdomen. William, more pragmatic, began researching infant development in the library's medical texts, gravely informing Eleanor of what to expect at each stage. It was William who first noticed Eleanor's fatigue as they walked in the gardens one crisp October afternoon. "You're pale," he observed with characteristic directness. "Should you be resting?" Eleanor smiled reassuringly. "I'm just a little tired, William. Nothing to worry about." But the boy's brow furrowed with concern. "Father would want you to rest." "Your father worries too much," she replied lightly, "but perhaps we should turn back now." That evening, as Eleanor prepared for bed, she found herself unusually weary. Edmund, noticing her discomfort, insisted on summoning Dr. Harrison despite her protests that it was merely the natural fatigue of pregnancy. The doctor's examination revealed nothing alarming, though he recommended increased rest and a tonic to strengthen her system. Edmund, not satisfied, announced his intention to bring a specialist from London. "That's entirely unnecessary," Eleanor protested. "Dr. Harrison has delivered hundreds of babies safely." "I will take no chances with your health," Edmund replied, his tone brooking no argument. The specialist, a distinguished physician who had attended royalty, confirmed Dr. Harrison's assessment. Eleanor was experiencing a normal pregnancy, though he too advised additional rest as her confinement approached. Somewhat reassured, Edmund relaxed his vigilance slightly, though he still insisted on accompanying Eleanor whenever she ventured beyond their chambers. The household adjusted to this new routine, the servants quietly ensuring that the Duchess's comfort was prioritized in every way. November brought the first snow, transforming Ravenshollow into a winter wonderland that delighted Charlotte and prompted William to design an elaborate snow fort. Eleanor watched from the window as Edmund joined the children in their play, his deep laugh carrying across the frosty air. "Your father seems happy," she remarked to William when he came in later, cheeks flushed with cold. "He is," the boy agreed, accepting the hot chocolate Martha had prepared. "He says you have brought the sun back to Ravenshollow." Eleanor smiled, touched by the poetic sentiment so at odds with Edmund's usual practical nature. "Did he really say that?" William nodded solemnly. "To Charlotte and me. He said we must always remember how fortunate we are to have you." That night, as Edmund read aloud to her from a new novel, Eleanor felt the baby move vigorously. "Oh!" she exclaimed, placing a hand on her rounded belly. Edmund immediately set aside the book. "What is it? Are you unwell?" "No, no," she laughed, taking his hand and placing it where the child kicked. "Feel. The baby is dancing." His expression transformed with wonder as he felt the strong movements beneath his palm. "That's remarkable," he whispered. "Our child is strong," Eleanor said softly, "like its father. And wise, like its mother," he added, his eyes shining with emotion. As December arrived, preparations for both Christmas and the baby's arrival occupied the household. Eleanor supervised the seasonal decorations from a comfortable chair, while Edmund divided his time between estate matters and ensuring every detail of the nursery was perfect. The children, excited by both upcoming events, were unusually well behaved, eager to please their parents and demonstrate their readiness for the responsibility of a new sibling. One afternoon, while Edmund was meeting with tenants and the children were at their lessons, Eleanor decided to rest in their bedchamber. As she entered, something white on her pillow caught her eye. A letter. Curious, she picked it up. The handwriting was clearly William's, careful and deliberate. The message, written on the finest stationery, was brief but powerful. "Dear Eleanor, Charlotte and I have talked about it, and we wanted you to know, we choose you. We love Father, and we loved our first mother, but we choose you too, to be our mother now and forever." With all our love, William and Charlotte. Tears filled Eleanor's eyes as she read the simple, heartfelt declaration. This gift, this acceptance from William and Charlotte, meant more to her than any title or fortune ever could. She was still holding the letter, tears streaming down her face when Edmund returned. His expression immediately shifted from greeting to concern. "Eleanor, what's wrong?" He crossed the room quickly, kneeling before her chair. Wordlessly, she handed him the letter. As he read, his own eyes grew moist. "They left it on my pillow," she whispered. "Edmund, they truly accept me." He took her hands in his. "Of course they do. How could they not love you, as I do?" I've tried so hard to honor Caroline's memory while caring for them as my own, and you've succeeded beyond any hope I could have had, he assured her. You've given them permission to love again, just as you did for me. Eleanor wiped away her tears, smiling through her emotion. I should thank them. Where are they now? In the library with Miss Pemberton. Shall I fetch them? She rose carefully, one hand supporting her rounded belly. No, let's go to them together. They found the children bent over their lessons, William explaining a geography concept to Charlotte with serious patience. When they looked up and saw Eleanor's face, they exchanged nervous glances. Did you receive our letter? William asked, his voice deliberately steady, though his hands fidgeted with his pencil. I did, Eleanor replied, her voice thick with emotion. It's the most beautiful gift I've ever received. Charlotte slipped from her chair and hurried to Eleanor's side. We meant it, she declared earnestly. We choose you to be our mother, forever and ever. William approached more slowly, his expression solemn. Is that acceptable to you? Eleanor opened her arms, and William, abandoning his usual reserve, joined his sister in embracing her. Nothing would make me happier or more proud, she told them, than to be your mother in every way that matters. Edmund watched the scene, his heart full beyond measure. His family, once fractured by loss, was whole again, stronger perhaps for having been broken and mended with love's careful attention. Miss Pemberton, he said quietly to the governess, who was discreetly wiping her own eyes, perhaps the children might be excused from their remaining lessons today. Of course, Your Grace, she agreed with unusual warmth. Special circumstances indeed. That evening they dined together in the small family dining room, rather than the formal great hall. The conversation flowed easily, filled with plans for Christmas and the baby's arrival. Eleanor noticed how William now addressed her directly, rather than through his father, how Charlotte leaned against her arm with complete trust and affection. Later, as she and Edmund prepared for bed, he drew her into his arms. Happy? He asked, though her radiant expression answered the question. Beyond words, she replied. When I think of how we began, you warning me never to expect your love, me accepting a marriage of convenience out of necessity, it seems like a different lifetime. It was, he said thoughtfully. You've given me a new life, Eleanor. A second chance I never thought possible. She placed her hand over his heart. We gave each other that gift. As Christmas approached, the bond between Eleanor and the children deepened further. William began bringing her his schoolwork for review, valuing her insights and praise. Charlotte insisted on helping prepare for the baby, carefully folding tiny garments and arranging them in the nursery drawers. Edmund watched this blossoming relationship with quiet joy, his earlier fears about the pregnancy gradually easing as Eleanor remained healthy and strong. Though he still insisted on her resting frequently, he no longer hovered with obvious anxiety, trusting in her resilience and the excellent care provided by Dr. Harrison. Christmas Eve arrived with a gentle snowfall that transformed Ravenshollow into a glistening wonderland. The four of them gathered in the great hall, now festively decorated with greenery and candles, to place the final ornaments on the tree. This one is from last year, Charlotte announced, carefully hanging a painted wooden star. Eleanor helped me make it, remember? And this one, William added, displaying a delicate glass ship, was Father's gift to me. Eleanor watched them, one hand resting on her abdomen, where the baby moved restlessly. Every object on the tree told a story of their family's journey, from grief to healing, from formality to love. Edmund joined her, his arms slipping around her waist. Are you tired? Should you rest before dinner? I'm perfectly fine, she assured him. I wouldn't miss this for anything. They were interrupted by Hawkins, who entered bearing a small package. A delivery for Her Grace, he announced. Just arrived from London. Eleanor accepted the parcel with surprise. How curious. I wasn't expecting anything. Opening it, she found a small velvet box containing a magnificent pendant, a heart-shaped diamond surrounded by smaller stones that caught the firelight and scattered it in rainbow patterns. Edmund, she breathed. It's exquisite. He smiled, clearly pleased by her reaction. A Christmas gift and something more. Look inside the box. Beneath the pendant lay a folded note in Edmund's handwriting. To my beloved wife, you have taught me that a heart once broken can not only heal, but grow stronger. This pendant symbolizes my promise to love you, today and all our tomorrows. With eternal devotion, Edmund, oh Edmund, she whispered, tears threatening again. It's beautiful. He took the pendant from its box and fastened it around her neck. Not nearly as beautiful as you. Christmas Day dawned bright and clear. The morning was spent exchanging gifts by the fire, the children's excitement filling the house with joyous noise. Edmund presented William with a finely crafted telescope, while Charlotte received an elaborate dollhouse that Edmund had secretly commissioned months before. The children had prepared gifts as well. Charlotte had embroidered handkerchiefs for both her parents, the stitches uneven but made with evident care. William had written and illustrated a small book of poems, serious, thoughtful verses that revealed his sensitive nature, usually hidden beneath his reserved exterior. For Edmund and Eleanor, it was a day of profound gratitude. As they watched the children play with their new treasures, Edmund leaned close to whisper, "Did you ever imagine such happiness was possible?" "I hoped," she replied softly, "but the reality exceeds all my dreams." That night, after the children had gone to bed, still chattering about the day's events, Eleanor and Edmund sat together before the fire in their private sitting room. The baby was particularly active, prompting Eleanor to laugh as a particularly vigorous kick made her jump slightly. "I believe our child will be quite athletic," she remarked, guiding Edmund's hand to feel the movement. "Or perhaps musical," he suggested with a smile, "like its mother." Eleanor was about to reply when a sharp pain caught her by surprise. She gasped, her hand tightening around Edmund's. "Eleanor!" Alarm sharpened his voice. "What is it?" "I'm not sure," she began, but another pain interrupted her words. "Oh!" Edmund was immediately on his feet. "I'll send for Dr. Harrison." "Wait," she said, trying to remain calm. "It may be nothing. False pains are common in the later months." But another contraction, stronger than the first, made her reconsider. Perhaps the doctor would be wise after all. Edmund rang for a servant with such urgency that Hawkins appeared within moments, still in his evening attire. "Fetch Dr. Harrison immediately," Edmund ordered. "Tell him the Duchess may be in labor." "Yes, Your Grace." The butler departed swiftly, recognizing the seriousness of the situation. Edmund returned to Eleanor's side, his face tight with concern. "Let's get you to bed," he said gently. "Can you walk or shall I carry you?" "I can walk," she assured him, though she leaned heavily on his arm as another pain seized her. By the time they reached their chambers, the contractions were coming regularly. Martha arrived, having been alerted by Hawkins, and immediately began preparing the room according to the doctor's previous instructions. "It's too early," Edmund muttered, pacing beside the bed where Eleanor now lay. "The baby isn't due for another fortnight at least." "Babies have their own schedules," Martha said practically, though she too looked concerned. "First ones often come a bit early." Dr. Harrison arrived within the hour, his examination confirming what they already suspected. "The baby is coming tonight, Your Grace," he told Eleanor calmly. "Everything appears normal, though slightly ahead of schedule." Edmund's face had gone pale. "Is there any danger?" "No more than any birth," the doctor replied, his manner reassuring. "Her Grace is young and healthy, and the baby has been developing well." But Edmund could not be easily comforted, his mind haunted by memories of another Christmas, another birthing chamber. "I should send for the specialist in London," he said, moving toward the door. "There's no time," Dr. Harrison said firmly. "The baby will arrive before morning. I assure you, Your Grace, I am fully capable of attending the Duchess." Eleanor reached for Edmund's hand. "Stay with me," she pleaded. "I need you here, not fretting about London specialists." The naked fear in his eyes nearly broke her heart. "I cannot lose you," he whispered. "You won't," she promised. "We'll face this together, as we have everything else." The labor progressed steadily through the night. Eleanor bore the pain with remarkable composure, while Edmund remained by her side, his initial panic giving way to steady support. He bathed her forehead, held her hand through contractions, and whispered encouragement when her strength began to flag. As dawn approached, Dr. Harrison announced that the time had come. "The baby is ready to meet the world," he said cheerfully. "One more good push, Your Grace." Eleanor gathered her remaining strength, gripping Edmund's hand tightly as she followed the doctor's instructions. There was a moment of intense pain, followed by the most beautiful sound she had ever heard, the lusty cry of their newborn child. "A boy!" Dr. Harrison announced triumphantly. "A fine, healthy son." Edmund stood transfixed, watching as the doctor placed the squalling infant on Eleanor's chest. The baby, red-faced and indignant at his abrupt entry into the world, gradually quieted as Eleanor cradled him close. "Hello, little one," she whispered, tears of joy streaming down her face. "We've been waiting for you." Edmund found his voice at last. "Eleanor," he breathed, "he's perfect, you're perfect." He touched the baby's tiny hand with a reverent finger. "Our son." After the doctor had completed his examination of both mother and child, pronouncing them excellently well, and Martha had helped clean and settle them, Edmund was finally able to hold his son. "He has your eyes," Eleanor observed drowsily from the bed, exhaustion claiming her now that the ordeal was over. "And your chin," Edmund replied, studying the infant's face with wonder. "What shall we name him?" They had discussed various possibilities over the past months, but had not settled on a final choice. Now, looking at their son's solemn expression, so like William's, Eleanor knew. "James," she said softly. "After your father." Edmund's eyes filled with tears. "James," he repeated. "James Whittaker." A gentle knock at the door preceded William's anxious face peering into the room. "Father, is Eleanor—" "Come in," Edmund called softly. "There's someone you should meet." William entered cautiously, followed by Charlotte, who was practically bouncing with excitement despite the early hour. They approached the bed where Eleanor lay, their eyes wide at the sight of the tiny bundle in their father's arms. "Children," Edmund said, his voice thick with emotion, "this is your brother, James." William stared at the baby with fascination. "He's very small." "But he'll grow," Eleanor assured him. "Just as you did." Charlotte clambered onto the bed, mindful of Eleanor's comfort. "Can I touch him?" "Gently," Edmund cautioned, bringing James closer for the children to see. "Hello, James," Charlotte whispered, stroking the baby's cheek with a feather-light touch. "I'm your sister." William hung back slightly, watching the scene with an expression Eleanor couldn't quite interpret. "William," she called softly. "Are you all right?" The boy looked up, his eyes suspiciously bright. Is he truly our brother? Even though—" Understanding dawned. "Even though I'm not your birth mother?" Eleanor finished gently. "Of course he is. We are a family, William. All of us." "The letter we wrote," he said hesitantly. "We meant it. We chose you to be our mother." "And I chose you as my children," she replied, holding out her free arm to him. "All three of you now." William moved forward then, allowing himself to be drawn into a careful embrace. "He's rather handsome," he conceded, examining his new brother with cautious approval. "For a baby." Edmund watched his family, his wife, his two eldest children, and the newborn son he had once feared would never exist, and felt a completeness he had never thought to experience again. The shadow of his first wife's death, which had haunted him for so long, seemed finally to lift in the presence of this new life, this new chance at happiness. Later, when the children had been persuaded to return to bed for a few more hours of sleep, and Martha had taken the baby to the cradle beside Eleanor's bed, Edmund sat holding his wife's hand, unwilling to leave her side even for a moment. "You should rest," she murmured, though her own eyes were fighting to stay open. "In a while," he promised. "I just want to look at you a bit longer." "I told you there was nothing to fear," she reminded him with a tired smile. "You were right, as usual." He raised her hand to his lips. "Eleanor, I don't have the words to express what you've given me, what you've given all of us." "You don't need words," she replied softly. "I see it in your eyes, in how you are with the children, in everything you do." He leaned forward to kiss her gently. "Rest now, my love. I'll be here when you wake." As Eleanor drifted into peaceful sleep, Edmund moved to the cradle where his son slumbered. The baby's tiny chest rose and fell with each breath, his perfect fingers curled into small fists. "Welcome to Raven's Hollow, James," Edmund whispered. "Welcome to our family." In the days that followed, the house adjusted to its newest member. The children were endlessly fascinated by the baby, with William assuming a serious protective role, and Charlotte appointing herself assistant nursemaid. Eleanor recovered swiftly, her natural vigor reasserting itself. Within a week, she was able to join the family for meals, carrying James proudly for all to admire. Edmund watched over them all with a newfound serenity. The fear that had gripped him throughout Eleanor's pregnancy had finally released its hold, allowing him to embrace the joy of their expanded family without reservation. One evening, as January snow fell softly outside the windows, the five of them gathered in the family sitting room. The children sat on the floor playing a quiet game, while Eleanor nursed James discreetly in a comfortable chair. Edmund, watching them from his position by the fire, was struck by how completely his life had transformed in the span of a year. Last January, Ravenshollow had been a cold, empty place, its master as frozen as the winter landscape. Now warmth and life filled every corner, from the children's laughter to the baby's soft coos. "What are you thinking?" Eleanor asked, noticing his thoughtful expression. "That I am the most fortunate of men," he replied simply. William looked up from the game. "Because you have Ravenshollow?" Edmund smiled, shaking his head. "Because I have all of you." Charlotte beamed at this declaration, while William ducked his head, pleased but embarrassed by the sentiment. Later, when the children had gone to bed, and James slept peacefully in his cradle, Edmund and Eleanor stood together at the window, watching the snowflakes drift down in the moonlight. "I told you once that I would never love again," Edmund said softly, his arms encircling her waist. "That my heart was buried with Caroline. And I accepted those terms," Eleanor remembered. "How distant that seems now." "I believed it then," he confessed. "I truly thought myself incapable of loving anyone as I had loved her." Eleanor turned in his arms to face him. "And now I know that the heart has an infinite capacity for love," he said, his voice low and fervent. "What I feel for you doesn't diminish what I felt for Caroline. It exists alongside it, equally powerful but entirely different." "As it should be," she replied, touching his face gently. "Love isn't diminished by being shared." He kissed her then, pouring all his emotion into the gesture. When they parted, he rested his forehead against hers. "When you came to Ravenshollow, I offered you a cold arrangement. You've transformed it into the warmest of homes." "We did that together," she corrected him. "You, me, William, Charlotte, and now James. Each of us bringing our own light." From the cradle came a small sound, not quite a cry, but a gentle reminder of the new life they had created together. Eleanor moved to attend to their son, lifting him with practiced care. "He has your temperament," Edmund observed, watching as the baby settled immediately in his mother's arms. "Calm and steady. With perhaps a touch of your determination," she replied with a smile. "He knows exactly what he wants." As they stood together in the soft lamplight, their son cradled between them, Eleanor reflected on the extraordinary journey that had brought them to this moment. What had begun as necessity, a practical arrangement between strangers, had blossomed into the deepest love, creating a family bound not by obligation but by choice. "I love you, Edmund," she said simply, the words encompassing all that lay between them, past grief and present joy, challenges overcome and future promises. "And I love you, Eleanor," he replied, "more than I ever believed possible." Outside, the snow continued to fall, wrapping Ravenshollow in a blanket of white that glistened in the moonlight. Inside, the warmth of family and love kept winter's chill at bay, a testament to hearts that had chosen to love again, to children who had chosen a mother, and to a duke who had discovered that his vow never to love again had been the one promise worth breaking. The end, dear listener. As our tale of Eleanor and Edmund draws to a close, perhaps you find yourself reflecting on your own journey through life's winters and springs. Like Ravenshollow Manor, our hearts sometimes grow cold with disappointment or loss, walls built high to protect what remains vulnerable within. But remember this, no heart is ever truly closed forever. Even in our darkest seasons, the possibility of renewal awaits, often appearing in the most unexpected forms. Just as Eleanor's gentle persistence melted the Duke's frozen heart, so too can new connections and quiet courage transform our own stories. Life seldom unfolds as we expect. The arrangements we make for practical survival can, with patience and openness, blossom into the very fulfillment we had ceased to believe possible. The children's simple letter, "We choose you," reminds us of a profound truth. Love is always, at its core, a choice we make, day after day. When you face your own challenges, when doubts whisper that happiness belongs to others but not to you, remember Eleanor's quiet determination. Remember how Edmund learned that protecting oneself from pain also shields us from joy. Remember that families form not only through blood, but through the deliberate choice to care for one another. As you rest tonight, know that your story continues to unfold. Yesterday's sorrows need not determine tomorrow's possibilities. Like the frost that eventually yields to spring, your winter too will pass. Until then, may you find peace in the knowledge that second chances await, that healing comes in its own time, and that your heart, like the Duke's, holds more capacity for love than you might yet recognize. Sleep well, dream sweetly, and awaken renewed to write the next chapter of your own remarkable story. With deepest gratitude, Legends of the Fall. Thank you for staying with us until the very end of this story. From the bottom of our hearts, we ask you to subscribe, like, comment, and share this video, so we can continue to feel inspired to tell new tales full of love, redemption, and life-changing twists. Your support means everything. It's what keeps this channel alive. And don't go just yet. At the end of this video, another story suggestion from our channel will appear. Click and be surprised by more emotional journeys like this one.